Hey guys, welcome! Here's my custom painted K2SO. Then with a few basic weathering steps, I've got him looking like this. Quite like him, eh? Looks great. My theme for this is a support droid for a hardworking stormtrooper team on Tatooine, scouting Mos Eisley, looking for a couple of lost droids. And today in this video, I'll take you through the rest of the processes I used to have him looking like this. The highlights, metallics, enamel washes, and the all brushes work. Hey guys, welcome! Now, as this rolls along, I'm really starting to have a better understanding of what we are doing here. I'm noticing that everybody who comes in and is supporting me on this is also an artist. I mean, I guess that makes sense, but as it rolls along, it's really becoming clear to me. So I really want to say, heartfelt, I really want to say thank you. Thank you for understanding what I'm doing with this. It's been very educational. It's really cool. Okay. I'll do a proper shout out. I want to welcome all of the newer people, and I'll do that for the next public one because I want to give your introduction some more legs. So we'll do it that way. For this video, I'm super happy with it. I'm really happy about it. I've listened to your advice. The comments that come back and the feedback from you guys is really, really good. It's they're not nitpicks. They're very good guided commentary. So I've taken that on board and worked within my skills to improve them and work on it. Pacing, outlining the content, showing more of the work on a particular piece so you can see the progression, those things. So I think you should be happy with this too. Please do let me know. It's a little bit longer. With the idea of pacing, I wanted a few of the parts to run real time so you could get a real feel for it, for the process and how I'm doing it. And I left in any things that I kind of messed up just a little to give you a bit more of a, so it's a bit more of a taste of reality as well, if that makes sense. So I hope you really like that one, and I hope these intros aren't too long. I just wanted to preface it so you have an understanding of what I think I'm doing, and then we can probably fine tune it from there. Okay, cool, let's go. Okay, highlights. Now in terms of highlights on this model, I'm going to go and use it as a super detailing effect rather than an overall highlighting method. The scheme for this is relatively simple. It's basically black and white, tones of that, with this high impact orange color on one side. Because of that lower amount of visual detail and the relatively high amount of physical weathering shown on the model, and also because it's a relatively large scale model at 1/112 scale, I thought it would be fun and interesting to add some visual relief to some of the chips on this model. So in the future we can do something where we highlight the whole model, but that's very involved and complicated, and there's a couple of different ways we could do it. With the shape of K2SO, I don't think it really lends itself to that. So for this one, sorry that was a long preamble, I'm just going to go with highlighting the particular chips on this. It's a pretty well-known and popular technique. I mean, I personally started doing this kind of thing maybe even 15 years ago on Warhammer models, and it just looks really cool. It's realistic to a point, but it's more of a visual detail. So simply put, in the previous video you saw me, I added quite a few chips to this. I wouldn't say you should highlight all of the chips. Now, I'll say don't highlight all of the chips. Sorry, I'll come out and say it. I've got to, for you guys, my supporters, I don't want to beat around the bush. I want to be as clear and succinct as possible. You'll see some models that are overly chipped, and it ends up looking too much. It's too much visual detail, and our brain and eyes feel uncomfortable looking at it. So with this one, I'm just going to hit the ones that look big enough that they might be deep enough to actually have some light reflecting off the bottom. I've gone pretty hard because I thought this model was perfect for showcasing this sort of technique. It's very, very simple. So the highlights from the previous one, they're basically a combination of dry brush and painted on with acrylics. This one, my wet palette was still in really good condition. I've simply added, I'm using Vallejo Game White. It's not my best choice for this, and in fact, I'll be really honest, I didn't like it sometimes. It's just not pigmented enough or opaque enough for this kind of job. It looks okay when it goes on wet, but then when they dried, some of the chips just disappeared. So I know how you guys will feel. I have excellent brush control, and I'm using one of my better brushes here, but you don't want to go back and redo it, do you? I mean, that's a nightmare when you think about it. It's difficult enough to nail your highlight to a chip once without having to retouch it. So I'm looking into some other kinds of paints that I think will be more useful for us, and I'll come back with feedback on that shortly. But for now, I'll take you through with what I did here, and so I'm working off the wet palette. It's a Vallejo game color. It's not bad, it's kind of a translucent white, and I'm very carefully underlining the most prominent chip. Okay, technique. It's important to keep the light source in mind all the time. When you're starting out with this, if you're doing it for the first time, just imagine that the model in the final pose that you're considering using is lit from directly above, so then the shadows and or the highlights should fall underneath the chips. It's really very simple that when you think of it that way. If you want to look up this term, it's called zenithal lighting, and it basically just means lit from above. You can get fancy with it and do it from a direction, like a diagonal 3/4 type thing, and that will enhance the impact of some of these models. For this guy, he's very much vertical, he's straight up and down. So I kept it super simple. My theme for this model is no gimmicks, except no gimmicks except the ones I choose to use. But no gimmicks that are overly complicated is probably a better way to say it. So I've lit it from directly above so that the highlights and shadows fall directly underneath the features I'm working with. Then you just simply need to put a white dot or series of dots or very fine lines underneath those features. Gosh, Link, you make it sound so easy. Yeah, I know. The real talent here is the real skill required is your very steady hand, the right consistency of paint, and placement. Once you've got those three things together, it is actually a pretty helpful and useful technique. Restraint is very important though. Like I said before, don't overdo it. White here is pretty forgiving because I've used the off-white, right? It's character white. It's off-white, so it's forgiving. Even if I'm a little heavy-handed, most of the chips will disappear because of the white. And maybe the Vallejo game white's translucent property, maybe it's helped me in this one. Maybe it helped it to make it look less dotty. But in either event, I think the outcome on this one has been relatively, it's been pleasing. It looks good. So, why white? I know the questions you're going to have, because if you go through Games Workshop process, they always tell you to use a shade of your base color. Technically that's correct. In this case it is white, so it's very simple, part of the simple methodology for it. But I'm also going to wash over most of these chips with a little bit of, say, either one of the ink things I'm using or one of those Games Workshop shades. I believe they're called shades, right? Like non-oil, or specifically the main one I'm going to use is a very thin overbrush of Agrax Earthshade, and that helps to knock it down and bring it back to the overall tone. It's much easier to do than mixing specific shades for highlighting. That's a very high level technique. I don't think it's necessary for us on a model like this. You can get away with straight white, shade it afterwards, and that brings them all together, and it also helps them to sit into the model, if that makes sense. Doing a slight overbrush of any of the weathering colors that you've chosen for your palette will help those chips to seat into the model, gives them a little bit of an apparent age, and helps them to look right and cool and in. Hope that made sense. I mean, it makes perfect sense to me. We'll go through and I'll do this more. I'm going to do a more exaggerated version of this on some Warhammer models in the future. I think they're an excellent platform to learn advanced weathering techniques like this, and then bring them back in a subdued, more restrained version to something like this that's more of a scale model. That looks really good there, the chip under the neck. I'm careful not to do all of them. The finer chips are fine to let go. It's these bigger ones that will have a little bit. Up around the neck here, it's a little bit difficult to keep your lighting source in mind. And that's another thing too. When you're painting your model in sub-assemblies like this, I think it helps to keep your choice of lighting source simplified. If I was doing one of those fancy 3/4 type zenithal effects, keeping it right in your head is difficult and tiring. So in that case, going from directly above is not a bad thing. And for the level that we work at
for a model like K2SO, it's already better than probably 99% of the models that I see online. They've not been done to this level of thinking, so that works fine for us, I think, in this case. Super happy I was able to capture some decent footage. This is redressing the chips. See the one under the neck there, it's a little bit too bright. So Agrax Earthshade, slightly watered, I'd say about 50-50. And it turns it not only helps set it into the model, but turns it into a little bit of a feature with the dribble. And you can see what I've done there. I've dragged it down as well as helping to blend in the chips. So you're really the old two birds with one stone story here. And I like how it skipped out there, and it looks like the drip missed the beat. Now it's very thin. It's not going to be a prominent detail, but our eyes will still pick up this visual detail, so it's worth adding in. And but the main purpose there was to help the chip to seat properly, and you can see there it's blended in very nicely. I think I liked it so much that I added a bit more. Let's see, what do I do here? There it was. I was deepening up the. I added a little bit of the chipping paint to the inside of the chip there to make it a little bit darker. And there I am. I'm just very gently overbrushing some of the highlighted chips there to help seat them in. It really is that simple, and you can be quite rough with it. It's just part of that process there. Next, metallics. We'll keep them relatively simple on this. It's more of a very fine added detail than a feature. And it's mostly because I think K2SO enjoys, he's got a very metallic sheen. It helps to bring to light the idea that he's a robot. You can see there that even before starting this, I already have a metallic sheen there. I thought I could keep this section relatively short for you. I've done exactly this process previously with the darker of the Games Workshop silvers. So I'm just grabbing them now for you, Lead Belcher. And I did an initial all-around flat brush, dry brush. Say that 3 times really fast. And the brush there, it's one of my favorites for dry brushing this kind of stuff. It's a Tamiya synthetic flat brush. I don't think there's any value in buying an expensive brush for this. And dry brushing is inherently pretty damaging to your bristles. So, these brushes, price performance, perfect for this kind of duty. So it was first layer all the way around of Lead Belcher. Then I'm coming back here with Stormhost Silver. I don't know. I've got Runefang Steel and Stormhost Silver. So the Stormhost has a white cap, so I thought it might be brighter. It looked good in this case. I focused on the upper facing, forward and upper facing edges and try to use them to, to accentuate catching the light. Now you can also see I'm downward dry brushing in very select places here to give it an upward facing sheen. It's very easy to do, but it's so easy to overdo. So by all means, please be very careful. Build it up gradually rather than one big hit. If that's the one thing you take away from my metallics thing here is, build it up very gradually. You can see it's actually quite bright. It's been on the brush for a long time. If I had have gone harder, it would have been much more pronounced. But you can see here in real time, I'm going up and trying to catch those edges there. And I'm definitely just going for the points. I don't want it all to be silver. You can see they're just hitting that outer point there, gave it a really nice look. I was quite impressed with this. The drying time of these Citadel paints is fantastic. In between handling this, I was able to get it done and move on really quickly. Now, liquid skill. We'll use Agrax Earthshade to bring that silver and these highlighted the gray area here in line with the tone of the rest of the model. And this product and this combination, the combination of the Games Workshop metallics and their shades has really rekindled my age-old love affair with acrylic paints. I've been away from them for a while. They weren't conducive to use in a Japanese sweatshop studio. I mean, we had to use local paints. Japanese people are very, proud of everything they do. It's not like I could bring in a British paint system, especially as I'm that one non-local in the studio, right? But the funny thing is, since then, subsequently, probably through constant exposure, my mate Max Watanabe is really into Citadel stuff now. So it'll be really fun going back to Japan now, showing him some of these things and talking about it, because he's since become a big fan. Now, I just slopped it on, really, much as I did, and I know one of my mates who watches the show, Nicky, Trugman, he sent me a message. He was absolutely appalled with my acrylic paint abuse, the way I just slopped it on, right? But it works, and the same can be said again for these shades. So long as it's not, if you're putting it over a dark color like this, the pooling is not much of an issue. If you're going over white, I'd be a lot more careful. But really, I basically just slopped this on and made sure it didn't pool too much, but it does its job as advertised. Over dark colors, however, on the white surface, the staining is much more apparent and you have to be a lot more careful. But on the dark colors like this, that's just an even wash, and I let it dry, it did its job, boom, we move on. So really sold on using these shades. They will appear a lot more in my videos from now on. And the drying time, the fast drying time with no fumes is wonderful. And here it is, just a couple of minutes of drying, and you can see that it's matted down, it's taken a slight level of sheen off and brought the colors together very nicely, perfect. Now that I've just professed my love for acrylics, let's say that enamel washes are always still going to be necessary. I mean, there's just a way they look, dry, and feel that provides such a contrast to how acrylics look. So I think they're a super useful part of our repertoire for finishing and making models look cool, especially for weathering. Now, I'll always include these, because I don't know if you're watching my videos for the first time, for example. I believe these washes can be shaken, but they get bubbly and they can be a little bit difficult to work. So if I haven't used it for a little while, I highly recommend using one of these electric paint stirrers. What you can achieve in a couple of seconds is worth probably quite a few minutes of shaking. And you know that the paint is then at the required mix that it was designed to do. And sometimes these go off. If they've been sitting around for too long, they'll go off and they won't. They separate in a weird sort of way. I've seen that. People showing them online. So doing this one, if it doesn't mix up properly after doing it with one of these, it's gone off and you could ask them for a replacement. I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. Two colors here, US Modern Vehicles Wash and Starship Filth. The US one is brown, Starship Filth is slightly green. I think between the two of them, we've got it covered. And I put them into this is a little disposable palette that I got at Daiso. It's like 10 for whatever the base price is there. And nice and useful, easy to use, and after I put a couple of paints in there, I can chuck it out. See the detail there on the front? Sorry, I was very quick. The detail on the front of the chest plate here is so thin, it's so shallow, that the acrylic ones need a little bit of depth to really work their magic. So for that kind of application, I believe enamel washes are just much easier. Here I'm using enamel odorless thinners, and I'm pre-wetting the surface, and then I'm going to add, boom, the wash in. The capillary action then helps us do the work. You can see as I drop it in there, it draws it around the surface. I use this method to pre-wet it when I don't want the surface to stain. I mean, realistically, if the surface is glossy, semi-gloss, it probably won't stain, but I find this order of things just works a little bit better, and I find I can help, getting the capillary action to work for me. If I want a sharper result, I'll try to do it this way around. Now, using the enamel thinners on Bandai plastic, as everybody knows, let's be very careful. It is easy for Bandai plastic is a little bit susceptible to breakages if exposed to long-term thinners, especially the mineral spirit ones. The the lacquer thinners will do it too, but these ones will especially do it. It's a little bit heavier at the bottom there. But I wanted to give you guys a heads up. I tested these when I was using the Humbrals for the dry brushing steps in the previous video. I found that the odorless enamel thinners wouldn't shift the Humbrals from the paintbrush. Now that's kind of anecdotal evidence. I'm not suggesting that that means that these are just fine to put on the plastic, but that tells me that they are definitely weaker. You know, in using the enamel odorless thinners, I've never had it, knock on wood, I haven't had it damage the plastic yet. I've been careful though. I'm doing it right. I'm priming it, I'm painting it, making sure it's sealed, and I'm keeping it away from the inner frame. But having said that, I have not had any challenges so far. And then when I realized that it was, you know, not shifting the paint like a Humbrol, a stronger paint, I thought, aha! I thought this stuff might be a gimmick, the whole odorless thing. I thought it might not be for real. And because I haven't bothered testing it with, say, you know, Tamiya or Humbrol thinners to see if it's actually different. But it obviously is chemically different and weaker. So, you know, that's a partial, anecdotal, kind of a little bit of a half-done test. What I'll do is, you know, I don't want to test it to ruin a model that I'm part way through. I mean, I invest too much in these things, right, to trash something. But I thought I'd throw that out there. So if you guys wanted to either test it or be careful, odorless enamel thinners are definitely the way to go. Now, I was very careful around here. The inner part of the neck here, sadly, is more visible than I had given it credit for. So I mostly did this outer neck ring here. I was of two minds. I could have painted this grey as well. I mean, it would fit, but this is an innie grey versus the shoulder armor outie grey. Technical jargon, right? But no, I wanted to keep it white to kind of to show it as a slightly more, you know, advanced part connected to the head, and I left the neck dark grey metallic. So that was just a call on that one. But to seat it properly, this is an upper facing surface, so kind of as a counter highlight, and to show that this would catch dirt and dust in the Mos Eisley environment that I've got it set in. I wanted to more heavily weather, to show more heavy accumulated weather up in that neck ring joint. So subsequent washes here with the enamel paints are doing that job for me. I'm really sorry. I hope that's okay that I didn't get too sidetracked there. I wanted to put all of that out there. It's not often that I get a chance to, you know, to test out something like that. I thought this one was a perfect example for it. But look, that inner neck joint there, I did not go there. I didn't put these enamel paints in there. Then when I tested it with a quick snapshot off my phone, I realized it was pretty obvious. So I went back and used Agrax Earthshade in the neck ring just to be safe. And the tones are not all that different. It actually does look pretty good. So I hope that one's useful for you too. Use enamels when you can get away with it. I think they do give a nifty, dirtier, oilier look. And then when you're a little bit nervous like I am, we can switch back to acrylics and use a bit of a hybrid approach there. You know, safety first. You guys are putting an investment into these models just like me. We've got to protect our time investment on it, right? Now that it's dried, you can see I'm readdressing a couple of points here. Enamel ones take a little bit longer to dry, but one of the cool things is you can redress them, and then with a bit of thinner, you can apply it multiple times until you get it right. Until you get it the way you want it to look, you can keep coming back and doing it. With the really pointy brush here, I liked it. I could actually point it in directly. So having a nice quality brush here. This is a red sable brush I got from Hobbyco. I'm actually going to show a different series of brushes soon, and I'll compare them, and hopefully I can find for you guys a good price performance red sable Kolinsky type brush that could work for us. Okay, cool. I wanted to show you that moment. Look at that. You see the way the brush came up? That was my old painter man moment of satisfaction. Now, finally, some oil brushes. Now, I know I've talked about these a fair bit, but they really are, upside down link, they really are my go-tos now. I just wanted a little bit of oil paint for this, and for that they're perfect. Oil paints in whatever form they are wonderful additions to the model, but this oil brush of fast in-out is just brilliant. So I'd experimented with this sort of color scheme before, as you develop as artists, as we all develop as artists, you know, we kind of pick up things that we like, and you can go back. I mean, if it worked once before and you really liked it, why not do it again? I really liked how the earth color looked on white. So it's going to be one I'll go to again. I wanted to add a heavier amount of, you know, the shadowing, discoloration that I knew the earth oil brusher product produces. So the enamels they're dry now on the front chest piece there, you can see around the neck as well. A good old neck grime. And I wanted a more pronounced effect for this very 3D detail on the side here. And, you know, oil brushes that fast in and out of just, you know, whip off the cap, couple of dots, bang, done. And they're just perfect for this kind of thing. Really, I'm not going to, you know, don't buy a bunch of colors on them. Just use a couple that you like the look of. This earth color, of course in Japanese, the humor is never lost on me. You know, I lived there a quarter of a century, way more than half my life. An ass color. I would still crack up every time I had to say that. And I know it's childish, I know, but it's just, you know, it's just too perfect, isn't it? I say it at home, and Tomoya and Tabitha both laugh with me. It was perfect here. Now you can see I had dry brushed under that. I'd really set this up. It was quite planned. As simple as I've made this finish out to look, it is very planned. It is very, you know, it's very precise and it's very strategic. So there was extra oil brush over the top of the dry brush, and that's just perfect. Here I've looked it over and decided, you know, I need some Starship filth on this. I wanted some darker colors, and I mentioned it earlier in the video that I was using the back of this model as a kind of a test ground. I mean, you can always get away with that with models. You know, you can pick a part that you know is not going to be super, you know, visible, or could get away with heavier weathering, for example. Use it as a test area just to, you know, we've all got always those, you know, those ideas. I wonder how this looks. I wonder how this will work out. And you just know that you can you'll probably both get away with it, and you know, it's low risk. So here, I wanted a combination effect. I've tried, the Starship filth, and I wanted to get this one in here, dark rust as well. Dark brown, isn't it? My apologies, I was getting the colors wrong, but what I wanted was a dark red color, and that's exactly what this is. It won't fit with the rest of the model so much. That's why it'll work just on the rear there pretty well. And I knew I could now, this would be working similarly to you guys who use, say, the Abtalung paints and you put them out on the cardboard. This is kind of a similar approach, but you can see how quick this was. This is all in real time, I didn't cut that. I'm able to put 3 different colors out, do the strategic dot technique. I went for reddish tones on the left and darker tones on the right. And after a very quick rummage, see rust. I knew I'd used rust on this one because it's correct. I wanted a darker test color up on the back here. I wanted one spot. I don't particularly think the Imperials would let a, you know, K2SO type droid seem like a sophisticated droid to me. But I wanted to get that color balance in and do it as a bit of a test. So up there, one spot with some dark rust. And it's more of a, you know, it's got more red in the mix. Not so much a real rusty color as it's a nice deep red maroon type color. And you can see really the benefit of these oil brushes there in just a couple of minutes. You know, really, literally, the time it's taken us to watch this together and talk about it, I've got all of those oil paints on a model ready to go. And after testing these oil brushes multiple times, the dry time is roughly, you know, 12 to 24 hours, as if we'd taken all of the, do you remember the joke in the last video? The linseed eels? The something eels? It's as if we've taken out, if you didn't miss it, sorry, that was just a joke about my mispronunciation in the last video. Look at the pigmentation in these oil paints. It's just phenomenal, isn't it? Look at that. I mean, that's why oil paints will always have a place in modeling. You can't get that with acrylics. You just can't. Oh, that's beautiful, isn't it? I love it. I love it. Just watching it makes me want to do it again. But what I was saying was that they dry like they've had the linseed oils taken out, so they're at least in a carrier oil there. The Ammo by Mig dudes, you know, they know what they're doing. They've made a product for us that dries correctly as we'd want it, and they packaged it in a fantastic little mascara tube for us to both laugh about, but also just to make it really useful. And you can see there, red on the left, greeny on the right. And that's kind of a modeling 101 color combination deal there. You know, when you look at concept art, they've always got a red side and a blue side. I take little inspiration from various art forms like that. Doesn't always have to be red and blue, but in this case, you know, red versus a greeny sort of tone. Extras there, streak them down, nicely transparent. There will be quite a bit of a difference. These things will dry. This finish here, see there, I took too much off. I remember that. I remember kind of cursing to myself, your brush was too dry, noob. You pulled all the oil out. What I did was I addressed it again. Once it had dried out a little bit, I just put a bit more back in. Very forgivable process over this satin coat lacquer. It's really easy. Now again, if you had have used an acrylic paint in this case for the base white, that's no problem. I would just, to get this kind of effect, I would try to use a lacquer like Mr. Supercolor Satin Semi-Gloss to try to, you can approximate the performance. If you still can't do that, you know, go with an acrylic one like Lucky Semi-Gloss, and it's not bad. It's just so hard to replicate the performance of lacquer clear coats. One of our guys said it was really funny. He said, you know, now that he had tried, he wasn't sure about it because they're expensive in Australia, but he got tough. He bought himself a can of the stuff, and he said, look, now all other clears are dead to me. You know, I really cracked up when I heard that, but it's very much true. It's very hard to equate the performance, but I understand for some people in cold places, etc., it's just impossible to use them. So we'll try to offer alternatives. Here's that earth color. The earth is a wonderful transparent. Look at the way it comes out here. Now in this case, I'll be honest, I've put too much on there. That's way too much. That's okay. You can see I'm thinning it. I'm spreading it out as much as possible. What you do is, when you put too much oil paint on something, you come back, actually it's looking pretty good. You know, my recovery skills are on point there. I know I shouldn't say it, but you know, I'm watching it going, hey, that's not a bad recovery. But what you do is, you clean it up a little bit like that, and you'll come back with a dry, flat brush and stipple it into the surface, and it will look much, much better. I really should do a separate video on that. Stippling works better on a flat surface. So on a semi like this, it's not going to work as good, but it's really a separate topic, you know, a separate sort of tutorial for another time. When I've got a Nizer coming up from the Machining Krieger property, I'll try to replicate my weathering magazine finish for you guys. And what I'm thinking is that will be a really good one to show flat finish stippling of oils, and for a really cool dusty effect. I mean, oils are really flexible like that. We can do a bunch of different things. Let me know in the comments. Let me know if that appeals. If that sounds cool to you, do please let me know. Don't let me forget. So, you know, we want it was the red and white splinter pattern camo Nizer. I did it with the Gustav originally, and I did it nice and dry. Okay, here we go. Real time. That's the stippling in of the oil paints to produce it's called a feathered effect. And it will be more feathered on flat. That's just how it works. And the more glossy it is, the less feathered it will be, because it just, you know, smears around, which can be good. But in this case, you know, satin semi-gloss is the best of both worlds. I didn't apply it to the upper edge here. So working for, I don't know if this is the correct art term, I call it color congruence, just making a paint finish believable by using similar colors around the model. I put it heavily around the sides, and then I added like a shadow and a tone to the top of this piece while using what was left over on the brush. In my mind, I've laughed about this and called it, you know, the Uncle Link dirty brush technique. No, I've not invented this. I swear artists have been doing this for the last 10,000 years. I mean, who doesn't use what's left on their brush, right? But this was a really cool example of it. I like it. Looks really nifty. I'll let this run because I wanted to show you guys. Look at the moment. I go here and I'm addressing the bottom of it. After having a look at it in the vertical orientation, I realized, yeah, I need a bit more shadow under that detail. Now I'll let this go in real time. I'm sorry if you don't like it, but I want to show how quick this is. that I just do a quick fumble off to the side and boom, it's in my hands. I've got Starship Filth there. I realized I only needed a bit of a dot, and because I'm trending towards the right side of this, see, I brought it back so I remember which color I used, but I could tell by looking at it there. So Starship Filth, again, greenish on the right, reddish on the left. I've kept that as a theme. I can pull them back out again, retouch this spot, use the exact same colors again, and it's a bit of a blend in. That's the same brush that had the odorless thinner on it, just to mix it in place. There's a little bit of cross-pollination there, but that's fine. Again, the color congruence thing, a little bit of mixing of them is more than fine. And then a stipple in reverse direction to push it up into the main place that I want shadowed. And you can see there already, that's a lot darker than the rest of it. Now in a moment of modeling panic, I realize it's way too dark. So I'm 50% joking there, but really, you guys know what I mean. You do a lot of your best work whilst panicking, because you look at it and you go, there, dirty brush technique. So I've moved it back down, and then I'm using it as a, that's like a glaze, moving it back down the armor piece to blend it in, and it looks fantastic. You can do that with, the glaze technique with acrylics, but it's very difficult and time consuming. Having done it here with the oil brushes, you can see there in real time how quickly I was able to achieve that technique. Because of the brush strokes, etc. down, I've taken away some of the contrast here on that detail. So here I'm just redressing it with some of the, that was the US Modern Army wash. And that just needs a slight redress. Is that the right way to say it, guys? A redress? Yeah, a reapplication, just to put it in, to recapture some of the contrast I've lost on that detail. And then it's done, good. And you can see it was quite timely. I mean, it was very time efficient. Sorry, I'm saying the wrong things. A quick touch down to paper to clean my brush. That's all it took. It's still ever so slightly damp, but I'm just cleaning off the tip. And I'm going in and strategically cleaning up the model now. That's the last step here. A strategic cleanup and placement of these oils so that I know that they can dry in the proper place, and then it will look awesome. Look at that, the graduation and colors across the back here. I'm really liking how this part turned out. Okay guys, so we're done for this one. That's the advanced weathering steps for this model. Please let me know your feedback for this video. Like, I've tried to base this on the good comments that you guys have given me. You guys have said that you prefer a slightly slower paced tutorial, so I've tried to keep this one in as much real time as possible, and also concentrate more on the money shot for this guy, the torso, and keep it rolling like that. So please let me know. I hope you like this one. Coming back to it now, I'm really liking it. I hope you guys liked it too. Thanks very much. Okay, time for the ads at the end, and look for your name in the credits. Cheers guys, see ya. I get my Star Wars kits, paints, and tools from my local hobby shop, Hobbyco. And let's do our part, support local, and check them out. If you're also in Australia, get your local hobby shop to contact Ryan at Hobbyco, and they will get Star Wars in for you. Cool, right? Extra special thanks to the pop co-producers Ivan, MB, Grant, Con, Simon, Robert, MC, and Kelso. Cheers guys! Big shout out to the Paint on Plastic supporter community who helped make all of this stuff happen. I couldn't be doing it without you artists supporting this artist. Thank you very much guys, sincerely.